That must be it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seats, we'll get started. I understand that we have a quorum. This doorkeeper, if you can get those doors closed, we'd appreciate it. Senators, when you come in, you should get a folder with a budget in it. If you have sat down and nobody noticed, please let us know. My mama would roll over in her grave. She knew I was chewing gum or something like this. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call the meeting to order. Our first item of business today is to adopt the rules of the Senate Appropriations Committee. In your folder, you'll find a set of rules. They're pretty much standard, pretty much what we had last year. But take a look at those, and if you've got any comments or questions, I'll be glad to entertain them. If not, I have a motion from Senator Heath and second. Who was the second? Senator Stone, to adopt these rules. Any discussion on rules or questions on these rules of the Senate Appropriations Committee? If not, I sense you're ready to vote. All in favor of adopting the printed rules of the Senate Appropriations Committee, please raise your hand. Okay, and thank you. And all opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're going to call HB 75, the amended FY15 budget from the House, and we'll take a few minutes and talk, maybe cover the highlights, and then open for questions, and we'll go from there. So, if you'll indulge me, I'll touch on some of the highlights. First of all, let me just thank the Budget and Evaluation Office staff, Melody Debussy and her staff, who work long hours. Anytime you ever want to, you can go to our website and pull it up, and you can pull up the members and what area they're responsible for. If you ever have a question, you can even tell, it has a number for them as well. So anytime you need access to the budget staff, I hope you'll take advantage of that. Of course, all of this works because Angela Tui works very hard to make all this happen. The subcommittee meetings, which is very difficult sometimes to set up, but Angela, I want to thank you publicly for your hard work. The Lieutenant Governor and his staff, and President Pro Tem and his staff, and the Majority Leader, to all of you, thank you very much. And last but not least, our subcommittee chairs, who many of whom have other duties, and this is a duty that they stop and put their attention to. And I thank you very much for your time and attention. And this, for those of you who are new, this was amended as kind of a run through. It's a little thinner and a little less involved, but the general budget will be a good bit more complicated and a lot more decisions to make. I would tell you this, also on the Senate website is something called Principles of Budgeting by the State Senate. And sometimes when you have a question as to why we do something a certain way, you might want to just take a minute and read that. But I would say this, that this FY15 amended budget meets the stated Senate policy on amended budgets, that we believe that amended budgets should true up formulas and scholarships and other programs to the actual use so far. We think that only critical needs or unforeseen needs should be funded in the amended budget, and that any new funding should be a really good reason for it as well. I will tell you this, the Senate version of the budget, I mentioned the Senate website that you can go to. We'll be posting this budget right away after this meeting. And as I was looking at it last night, I realized that every budget going back to 2008 is listed there for your perusal. So if you really don't have anything to do and want to kill some time, go back and reread all those budgets back to 2008. But you'll see some really incredible things that happened during the recession. But that information is there, and I would say this, that we're probably more transparent today than we've ever been, and that's a good thing for the people of Georgia. Governor Deal, I think, has met our goals of a amended budget as well, and I think he's included funds for critically important programs that are important to the economic development of the state and important to the safety and security of children in Georgia, is just to name two. The amended budget totals $21.1 billion. Basically, it's the general budget as amended by this budget. It includes lottery proceeds that are estimated at $947.9 million, and motor fuel proceeds estimated at $992.2 million. The amended budget is built on 3.6% tax revenue growth over actual FY14 collections. To go into some of the things that are in this budget, the mid-year education adjustment and teacher pay scale. There's $35 million added for broadband grants to K-12 systems in there. And economic development, the governor has recommended, and the House and Senate have agreed for an additional $20 million for regional economic business assistance grants, or as we call them around here, REBA grants. And these are completer packages to help bring jobs and investment to Georgia as well. Additionally, there's $20 million for the One Georgia program for rural economic development. There's already money in the base for those. I think they are a good predictor that there are a number of economic development initiatives that are ongoing, and hopefully even maybe while we're here we'll see some of the fruits of these. So these funds for economic development are to some degree prospective in that we put them out there. Sometimes the projects work out and sometimes they don't, but I don't want our governor to get to the point where he's got to write a check and he doesn't have the money in the bank. So that's why we are always willing to and able and eager to work with the governor's office to support their economic development efforts. Additionally, in this budget, you'll see some funding in 16 as well. It's the first piece of funding to support the Georgia Film Academy, some $515,000, and it is it starts the coordination of training and educational opportunities in Georgia for our folks in the state who want to get into the movie and film business trade. As we read about the rapidly expanding film industry in Georgia, one of the needs is tradesmen, or people who can step in and who are trained and can step in and do the work, and they don't have to import them from California somewhere. So that's, we think, very important, and we support the governor's efforts in that as well. In healthcare, some $81 million is included to fund growth and other elements of need that are associated with Medicaid. Some $12 million is included for Medicaid treatment of hepatitis C, a very expensive treatment, and Senator Underman can explain that more to you, but we're spending, between Medicaid and the State Health Benefit Plan, we're spending larger and larger amounts of funds on hepatitis C. On the other hand, those medicines are extremely effective, and hopefully over the long run will reduce the number of people with hepatitis C. Something that the legislature has been very interested in is in the State Health Benefit Plan supporting bariatric surgery. We have put language in the past and put funding in the past. It's good to note that the governor has included pilot funding for a State Health Benefit Plan of $2.7 million for bariatric surgery as well. It's $4.8 million for the clinical trials that'll help determine the effectiveness of cannabis oil in treating children's seizure disorders. Those efforts have already begun at Georgia Regents and Children's Hospital. One additional item that's 90.8 in the Department of Community Health is language that the House added that basically it added to language that called for for plans to be developed on state health benefit plan on cost analysis. The House added language on 90.8 that identifies non-certified school employees as a class of employees who deserve and should receive state health benefit coverage, and that any planning that's done by the department should include a plan to help make that happen. We concurred with that language, and that'll be something that you can, some of you are very interested in as well. Under children's issues, as the funding is included at $4.9 million for 103 child protective service workers. For DFACs, those workers have already been hired. This was done as a response to some very critical needs in DFACs as well. And then you'll see in FY16 some additional funding as well. We've increased funding in the Senate. The House increased funding for CASA, court-appointed special advocates for children, by $12,500. They had asked for $25,000 to make up the difference in the increased cost of the background check that's required of volunteers now. It's a fingerprint-based background check. We went ahead and went to the half of what they asked for. They asked for $50,000. We increased the House's $12,500 to $25,000. Governor Deal's initiative to ensure inmates can get a job and stay out of prison has its beginnings in this budget. You'll see follow-on language and follow-on spending in the 16 budget as well. But this funding for vocational training, for GED fast tracking, and establishing charter schools inside 2 prisons, along with more substance abuse treatment, all of that will cost about $3.2 million. Lastly, the governor started the process of booking the liability that the state has for providing the employer's portion of retirees' health care coverage. We're on a pay-as-you-go basis today. That check that the state writes is, by my memory, for ERS and TRS retirees for health care totals about, I think, $530 or $40 million. Accounting guidelines, national accounting guidelines requires or expects us to book that as a liability and begin to put those funds aside. I forget what the total is. It's $14 or $18 billion or so that would be needed. And of course, we're a long ways from there, but you have to start somewhere. The governor started this in this budget by putting aside $187.1 million for what we call OPEB, or other post-employment benefits is the acronym, OPEB. If you look in the 16 budget, you'll see another 98.2 for a total of $285.3 million between the 2 budgets to begin to put aside and book that liability. It would take about $1 billion a year to meet that liability. So, but the pressure we're under is that other AAA rated states are making progress on putting those funds aside, and Georgia has to do the same to remain a real well-operated state and continue to enjoy the benefits of a AAA bond rating. OPEB payments is just something we're going to have to consider doing in every budget. Local governments and school boards will be glad to receive forest land protection grants. These are replace property taxes for forest lands that are put aside and kept from development, and we think that's a good thing for the state. The state is under obligation to replace those funds, and this will catch us up, we believe, this $15 million. The Senate has an ad to refund or continue to fund the Transportation Infrastructure Bank. That's item 347.2. The amended budget proposes a plan to fund this infrastructure bank from motor fuel funds. We believe that the 4-to-1 match that the authority gets with this bank is a good investment for the state. Brings back approximately $15 million. It brings the total in that fund to approximately $15 million as well. We're pretty sure the House is on board with that. One reminder, just so you'll remember, this is an amend and add amended budget in that we take the basic general budget for FY15 and we add these items to it and adjust the figures. So The bonds that are listed here are the bonds from last year. This is the budget from last year as amended this year. So this is not a new set of bonds. These are all the same bonds that you passed on last March. So just to be sure you understand that. I would say this, that this is what I think I may have misquoted. It's a repeal and replace budget, in that repeal certain parts and replace them, but basically it's the underlying budget we've already passed. The House and Senate, I think, agree on most items in this amended budget, and I don't really foresee too much difficulty in resolving these differences and moving on to the 2016 budget as well. So with that, I'll stop and be happy to attempt to answer any questions. We've got Melody Debussy is up here with us, and anything that I'm not sure about, she'll be glad to give you the complete answer. So any questions by? Senator Mullis. You're ready for motion. All right. Senator Jackson, was your line on, or you didn't? Put it on. Okay. All right. Any questions from members? Yes, ma'am. Senator C. Oh, there you are. Oh, Senator Tate. I'm sorry. I was looking at Senator C. There you go.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry I'm late. I do apologize. I know you all have done yeoman's work on coming to the conclusions that you did for the Senate, and all of the committees, subcommittees did also. You mentioned at the very end that we are putting, we have a $16 to $18 billion deficit in pension for legislators, I think you said. No, okay. So please inform me as to what the $16 to $18 billion deficit is that we're now putting money into pension fund to catch up with what we...
It's called OPEB, Other Post-Employment Benefits. It is the liability that the state has for retirement health insurance benefits. In other words, for everyone who's retired, they pay a premium, but they have no employer. So the state is picking up the employer portion of that. State employees and teachers have an employer who pays the employer 70% or whatever that percent is. The state has been paying that portion and continues to pay that portion for retirees. We've been on a pay-as-you-go basis where we just write a check every year. Of course, we're self-insured, so that's easy to do. But accounting-wise, and I'm not an accountant, but there are some in here would tell you that anything that you owe in the future, you should book that as a liability, and that's what that is all about. Very few, I don't know that any states have completely booked that liability, but a number of them have begun down that road to put funds aside, and it's like a reserve. But of course, what you hope in the end is that the interest on those funds would make the payment every year rather than having to take it out of revenues.
Is there a reason why we have this much of a liability? Did we not pay during certain years? Was there something that created this amount of liability for us?
Well, let me just put it this way: the retirement benefit that employees earn is a contract, and has been held by the courts to be a contract. You can't just decide that you're going to pay it or not pay it. Truthfully, the health insurance is a liability, but not a contract. It's not contractual. And some states have, in fact, reduced the health benefits for retirees as one of the ways to save money. I don't know anybody's talking about that in Georgia, but because I think that liability is something that we take very seriously for retirees. But there again, it's an accounting thing. It's not a cash thing. On the other hand, if we didn't have to write that check, if we had $18 billion in the bank and could use the interest on that, we would have to write that check for $540 million every year. So it's part of being it's part of providing insurance for both your active employees and for those same employees when they retire. So it's a benefit, and it's a benefit that's disappearing, by the way. I mean, as you look at private industry, a school bus driver told me just last week that he had retired, I believe he said, from General Motors, from one of the car manufacturers. He has no health insurance, even though he worked for them 35 or 40 years, so he's driving a school bus and providing that service for the health insurance. So it's very important, both for active folks and for retirees, and something we should take very seriously. I see two more numbers of these. 7, that was you. Okay. And, okay, Senator C, now back to you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since Georgia is the 4th largest, fastest growing population among the seniors 65 and older, and since there's been evidence that there's been a spike in crime targeting seniors and disabled citizens, especially for financial gain, since the adult protection services grew 54% between 09 and 13, don't you think investments in the necessary protections of some of Georgia's most vulnerable citizens are necessary?
Well, I think there's an increase in the number of adult protective service workers in the 16 budget. The governor has proposed it, and we'll be looking at that when we take up the 16 budget. So I think everybody understands that's an area of growing need, and the governor has recognized it. And I forget the number of increased slots, but there are increased personnel
16.
slots.
So you're saying there is an increase for that in 16's budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
We handed out here a couple of weeks ago a FY15 and FY16 listing of it, pretty much every addition in the budget. If you still got that, you can look back. Of course, the 15 will change a little bit because of the House and Senate, but the 16 is still good for right now. You might want to go back and just flip through that, and you can see some of the positions, both for children and for seniors as well. Other questions? Senator Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the debt and sinking fund, the additional $8 million, could you give me an explanation on that the House nor the governor picked up?
If you repeat the question, I was trying to get your volume down a little bit.
On the obligation debt sinking fund, line 354.3, the Senate's position is an additional $8.3 million for debt service in 2016. Can you explain that for me, Mr. Chairman?
I'll try. Those are funds that we, in writing the budget, that we accumulated that we didn't have a particular purpose to fund in this budget. So by prepaying debt service, what we've done is pre-funded the bonds that we're going to add in the 16 budget. In other words, the governor has left $100 million for the legislature to add bonds, but my understanding is there's no interest payment, there's no interest in there for that, so we've got to generate the funds to pay the interest, which on a 20-year bond is about I forget what the percentage is. It's based on a projected percentage. So we have to generate those funds. So we fast forward, or we put forward those funds for the 16 budget to prepay a debt or a need that we will have in 16. So it basically is fungible. It'll move forward into that budget. Anyone else? Well, those have been good questions. Thought you had me there for a minute. I don't know about that answer, but I don't want to look at Melody. If I give her an answer that's suspect, she'll look at me sometimes. She's smiling, so I guess it was the right answer. Anyone else? If not, we'll be glad to entertain a motion. I think we actually have a motion, Senator Mullis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move to pass committee substitute to House Bill 75.
Have a motion by Senator Mullis, second by Senator Williams. Discussion on that motion. If not, I sense you're ready to vote. With those in favor of passing out House Bill 75, please raise your hand. Okay. Then all opposed. Very good. Motion carries. Bill is passed out of the committee by substitute. Mr. President. Madam Secretary, was the vote unanimous? Was unanimous. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Sure looked that way.
Yes, it did.